Hello, I'm Wendy. Today we're looking at some watercolour techniques. It's a spring willow bud painting and it's an easy tutorial. While I was out and about the other day walking the dog in my local patch, I spotted that the pussy willow were just starting to come out. I think we're all familiar with the pussy willow, and as you see the photograph here as it's zooming in, if you look at the structure then it's fairly straightforward. And I don't think the drawing is the major problem. What was bothering me, well, not bothering me, but I was wondering how the heck I could do those fluffy little buds that were on there without going too dark behind and keeping the lightness. Anyway, you'll see how I got on in the video. This is my drawing, and there's a link to it in the description box below if you wanted the template. I'm working larger than life size and a little bit bigger than I usually do paint for these videos. The paper I'm working on is Saunders Waterford 140 pounds knot surface, and it's a sheet that measures 11 by 14 inches. Now I used masking fluid to mask out the buds, but you could always dispense with that and paint around them if you wanted to, particularly since the background is going to be light. I quite enjoy working with masking fluid though. I know some people don't. I found the masking fluid particularly useful for doing those very small buds on the stems, so perhaps if you wanted to you could just mask those out and then paint around the larger shapes. If you are unfamiliar with using masking fluid, then you'll find there's a link in the description box to a video I made previously. When the masking fluid was totally dry, then I applied this very light grey background wash. I used Payne's grey with a touch of cobalt blue, and as you can see I put on a first coat onto dry paper. There's no need to wet the paper first because the wash is so watery and light. And then I gradually added some of the same mix but darker, particularly around where the buds were. It's a wet into wet wash, so you do have to work quickly when you're putting the paint on. If you do find it drying out a little bit, then use a spritz or a spray bottle just to damp the paper. The paint is almost dry. You can see it glistening a little bit there, and I used a very dilute mix of the same colours just to suggest some twigs in the background. You could put them on heavier if you want and make them more pronounced. In actual fact, towards the end of the video you'll see I did go back in there and add a few more. I painted in a light version of the twigs and then started on the bud casings, and I used cadmium orange mainly for the first coat, and then working wet into wet I added some darker mix, a darker brown with burnt sienna and ultramarine. If you look at the photograph here, you'll see that the bud casings are quite orange, and on some of the other photographs that I had it was even more apparent, so that's why I decided to put the orange on first and then working wet into wet, adding the brown shadow. You could try just leaving a few little bits of white as well as little highlights on the bud casing there. I worked in the same way on each one, and you may notice that I'd left some little white shapes at the base of each bud. I'm going to paint these a light green. Here's a photograph from last year showing them off more than this year's photos. Now for painting the twigs. I have speeded it up because it is a little bit repetitive, but I thought you might like to see me painting the whole picture here. I've mixed up 3 browns, and I'm using burnt sienna and ultramarine as usual, and I've got the lighter and the darker tones there, but I wanted to keep the twig generally quite dark. I thought that would probably work well in the composition against the light background. And now for the buds themselves. I did notice, looking at these pussy willow buds in different lights, then these shadow areas inside them, they can take on different colours. They can look a sort of brown, quite often greeny, and I've seen them with a real sort of purpley sheen on them. So I went with the purple because I thought, well, I thought it would look nice with the colours that I'm using, and I think it does work quite well. I made 2 or 3 different mixes, very light ones, medium one, and I did have a very dark one as well. And I was using ultramarine with light red for the purple. Putting on that first wash for the light area, it did go against the grain a little bit with me because I do like soft edges, and for this particular picture I thought it would work well with the harder edges there. So we've got the hard edge with the light wash, and then I'm dropping in the darker colours for the darker shadows in there. Putting on that first wash and leaving the hard edge meant that you're not losing any of the white paper. If you were to soften that edge, and certainly have a go and try and do that, I think if you were softening that edge, then you would lose some of that white, and I don't think the final picture would be quite as effective. You can see I'm dotting around the picture quite a lot, but everything is staying wet. If you work more slowly, then do 1 or 2 buds at a time, but I do work quickly, so I did keep everything very wet as I was working this up. Now those little green leaves at the base of the buds I painted with a mixture of a light yellow, cadmium yellow light or pale, with a little bit of cobalt blue. You could lighten and darken them a little bit, but they are only a little bit of the picture, so you don't need to go to an awful lot of trouble with them. Just a simple wash on there will work well. But I do like the yellowy green. I think it makes a nice contrast with the other colours in the painting, so I'm glad I put them in. So the picture was almost finished at this stage, but I had a good look at it and decided that I wanted to put a few extra bits and pieces on the twigs and to darken a few areas. I hope some of these watercolour techniques that I've been demonstrating can be of use to you in your own paintings. I look forward to seeing some of the Pussy Willow paintings in my Facebook group. People are being a little bit shy about posting in there, but I do like to see them, so please do post. Do subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss future content. Until I see you again, till next time, bye bye and happy painting.